Hello, it is Brooklynn Dean here, crazy ass writer who tried to do some YouTube shit, but I am just so not motivated to do anything that isn't writing that I kind of forget about everything else that I start doing that's not writing. So it's been a minute since I've uploaded here. I'm sure all of the 3 people who watch my stuff have been missing me. However, there are luckily a lot more of you who like to read my books. And since it's the night before Christmas, and isn't there a whole big giant poem story about reading stories at the night before Christmas? 'Twas the night before Christmas and all through the house and all this BS. Well, all through my house is a bunch of insanity because I got a new kitten and my cat hates her and they're out there fighting, and I've locked myself in the bathroom and I put up these cute little black hearts as a cute background, since my running gag here is being super professional on YouTube as I record from my phone still, because very professional. Oh, I don't know if you guys heard that, but that was icky. Anyway, night before Christmas is story time, and I figured the story I would read for you is my own, The Word of the Rock God, and I chose this one over Fiberglass Galaxy because my main character, Max, is a super devout Catholic, which I am not, and I mean no disrespect by it, but we're different there. I said we different. Grammar, English, you know. Point being, I'm going to read for you some of this book because it is the night before Christmas, and that's all about storytelling to me for some reason, and Max is super Catholic, so it just makes sense that we would celebrate Christmas with him. And also, if you want the ebook version of this and Fiberglass Galaxy, they are on sale right now. They are only $2.99. Go get them. It's going to be for all of 2019. The rest of the year, they are going to be super cheap and on sale. So, let's get into it. The Word of the Rock God by yours truly. Okay. Chapter 1, if you would like to follow along with me. You don't have to. Okay. Man, Craig scoffed, his fingers strumming down the line of strings on a second-hand guitar. How is it even possible that my neck cracked? Loading the van drunk, Max answered, a small laugh slipping through his lips. Yeah, funny. At least we found a replacement. Yeah, and it's shit. Listen to it, he huffed. Easy, Max said, chewing on the edge of his Dixie cup. I'll go get you a drink, he added as he hopped down from the back of the couch. Whatever, man, Craig said, brushing his hands through his hair before focusing on the foreign guitar again. With the doors now open, the small bar was filling quickly. Max's eyes glanced around at the line of people waiting to get wristbands or red X's. They moved to their left, where the stage stood just 4 feet above the ground. I mean, professionalism at its finest, people. But again, we're here because I'm a writer, not because I'm a YouTuber, right? Where were we? A crowd had already formed near its edge, tight, with no gaps between shoulders, and it separated further as it moved back toward the bar. Arguably, one of Max's favorite parts of playing in a new city was the ability to walk amongst the crowd anonymously. Every night he was unknown, another faceless mass in a mass of faces, and every night he was reborn, the stage lights giving shape to his blurred features, the microphone providing authority to the once whispered voice. He liked these moments when he could walk inside the bar and maintain that anonymity. He liked the feeling of being no one to them, of being no consequence when his shoulders brushed against someone in the crowd. He liked the way they only glanced at him, offering a lazy smile when he apologized. When he met with those same faces after his 30 minutes of mattering, he felt flattered in the new appreciation. It stayed with him, but what once seemed so perfect under the neon spotlights felt strangely hollow in a dark hotel room. It may have been the extreme contrast of an empty bed, cold and isolated, to the crowds that surrounded him after a set. So many bodies pressed so closely together, each in their own separate effort to see the look on his face when his eyes fell onto theirs. It created a heat that rivaled the sun. But for what purpose? Though he wanted to believe each person standing before him, each person just learning his name for the first time, would remember what he said when he was standing 4 feet above them, he couldn't deny the validity of the thoughts that crept inside his mind during those isolated hours. Whether he was safe inside a bed or hours into a dark drive to a new city, his eyes heavy as his mind drifted to and from consciousness, Max questioned his impact. Was anyone there for the music? Were they all there for the art? Or did they merely seek the opportunity to feel important in the few seconds they stood before someone with a dream made reality? Those thoughts, those newly formed opinions that twisted positive experiences into troublesome memories, those thoughts always made him aware of just how hollow all that praise might be. It was disheartening if he chose to believe it, but if nothing else, disillusionment and 3 a.m. were the perfect cocktail for artistic release. At least he'd get some new songs written. Placing his elbows over the golden rod that lined the bar, Max leaned forward, waiting patiently for the bartender to make his way to him. What mattered most on nights like this, the absolute best part of any evening, was the connection Max felt when he'd bend his knees almost eye level with the crowd at his feet, and he'd see smiling lips forming the same shapes as his. The admiration within their eyes was obvious. It mattered very little to Max, though. He found importance in the hope that radiated within their eyes and the way it blended with their vocalization of his words to create something corporeal. As it rose up from the lungs that sang for him, from the eyes that adored him, from the hands that reached to him, Max marveled over the power of the spirit and how easily it could prove itself within one simple sensation. A chill that ran down his spine like a shot of adrenaline. Oftentimes he'd remove his earplugs, hoping somehow over the speakers in his magnified voice that he'd hear their voices too. Nothing made him happier than taking a hand that had been reaching for him all evening. When he felt the tingling energy pass from their hand to his, the energy that told him for certain he mattered to this person. Not his spot on the stage, not the sound of his voice. Only something so pure as the connection shared between two souls, two like minds trying desperately to understand the emotions that built up inside them separately, but felt entirely alike, could produce something so electrifying as the jolting energy passed between their palms. Nothing but the deep and incomparable connection 2 people, or 5, or 100 shared when they spoke the words that mattered most to them, when they spoke the words that healed their internal wounds, similar to the wounds he'd had when composing them. Those words, with their protective energy, became a safety net to the people who admired him, and in return that admiration became his shield. It was an understanding privy only to those inside the net, and explaining it to someone who'd never felt their own emotions sung from someone else's lungs was a pointless endeavor. It was why he chased that sensation wherever he went. It was why his words meant more to him when they danced on someone else's tongue. It was why he loved the way they sounded when pronounced with different accents and different tones of voice. Whatever he'd been feeling when he composed the lyrics was almost entirely irrelevant in those moments. The specifics of that situation didn't matter at all. The beauty of those moments, the purity of such connection, was found inside the emotion of it. That shared emotion, invoked inside someone else when he wrote the way it felt to him, was the most innately human experience of any other. It reminded him, through the tears in the eyes of those who felt it, through the sincerity in their voices when they sang it, that everyone is linked, but through something far more powerful than just DNA and chromosomes. "What are you having?" the bartender pointed to Max. 2 tequila shots, doesn't matter what brand. Sitting a $20 bill on the bar, Max used his fingers to push it closer to the bartender's side of the counter. The small lights above them caused the glitter speckled over the recklessly applied blue nail polish to shimmer in the otherwise dim area of the bar. And when the man standing next to him took an obvious note of it, Max withdrew his hand quickly. It wouldn't matter in an hour, he reminded himself. In an hour, that stage would make everything odd about a regular person somehow seem interesting and attractive. He smiled when the bartender turned back and placed the 2 shots on the bar. "Both for you?" the guy chuckled, eyeing Max's frame and shaking his head. "No," Max answered as he took them, attempting to position his hand in such a way that his fingertips weren't so exposed. "I don't drink." His head downcast as he moved away from the bar, Max turned directly into a body behind him. "Oh, I'm so sorry," he said quickly, a sudden heat dancing between the skin of his cheeks. "I'm fine," she answered in a voice so melodic it lured Max's eyes upward immediately. He blinked, head shifting as if to remove him from a trance. Her eyes, in the reflection of the yellow burning lamps, appeared almost golden. She exhaled a small chuckle, her brows lifting. Then she looked to the glass in his hands. "Looks like we've had some casualties, though." Max's brows creased briefly, then his sense of self-awareness was revived. Looking down, seeing that both drinks had been expelled from their glasses by the sudden force, Max's shoulders fell. He turned back to face the bar, sitting the 2 glasses down. 2 more, the bartender chuckled. He nodded, smiling thinly. The woman leaned over the bar. Those are on me. And she looked to Max. Oh, you don't have to. Both for you? She asked, and Max's eyes narrowed briefly. She couldn't have heard what the man said, and she didn't seem to be mocking him. No, he smiled a bit. They're for my friends. Not a shot guy, huh? You could say that, he answered, not wanting to see the aversion with which his sober lifestyle was often met in these types of places on the beautiful features of his new acquaintance. Her eyes narrowed, falling away from his bright blue eyes and raking over his body, the leather jacket draped over a simple orange shirt and the thin silver chain tucked inside his collar. I'm going to guess you like something sweeter, she smiled. Oh no, she tapped the bar. Add a dirty Shirley and a Manhattan to that. You got it, the bartender said, sitting the 2 shots on the bar and turning back to the array of bottles on the shelves behind him. Max reached toward his back pocket, ready to remove another bill from his wallet, but her hand intercepted his. He looked down to the connection quickly. Heat seemed not only to radiate from her hand, but also move into his. He felt the sensation as tangible as her hand itself, feeling the way the heat seemed to roll off of her like waves and creep inside the pores of his skin like water seeping into sand. I said it's on me, she grinned. No, I ran into you. I couldn't. You could, you can, you are. She raised her brows toward the bartender as he set the other 2 drinks in front of her. This one, she lifted one of the glasses, filled with a clear liquid, and offered it to him, is for you. Oh, I don't. He bit his lower lip briefly. Are you sure? I feel bad taking these as it is. Don't feel bad, she said, taking his free hand into hers again, the warmth caressing his skin before slithering inside it, and placed the mixed drink in his palm. I'm happy to support the arts, she winked. His brows creased as he looked into the irises still, under closer inspection the color of paling sun. She didn't seem the type to listen to his music, or to even know he was a person who created any at all, but if she was supportive of it, he thought it best to politely accept her offer. Surely Craig would drink it. Well, he swallowed somewhat thickly, worried over how swollen his tongue suddenly felt. Then he smiled to her. Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, I appreciate you, she grinned, something devious inside the knowing glance she gave the glass. She added, enjoy. He smiled once more, watching the way her lips never parted when she returned the gesture, giving her an air of nonchalance he hadn't been able to manufacture with her. Her eyes lingered on him briefly as she turned to face the bar, her velvet dress allowing her to slip easily onto one of its stools. When their connection was lost entirely, Max stepped away from the bar and headed back toward their small prep room. His eyes roamed the area before the stage. As always, he marveled at the way people closest to it were packed together and how the space between shoulders increased when proximity to the stage decreased. The most intriguing thing about having so many bodies tightened into such a small section, however, was that it had no real boundaries. There were no walls, no barriers, no chains. It was as if the floor where it aligned with the stage also had a ledge from which to fall, and they stood almost on top of one another just to avoid a dreadful descent. While it was endearing to see such a collective, there was always a disheartening factor. Much like the duality of man in general, there were opposite forces at work inside a group of men. Packed together, shoulder to shoulder, closer to strangers than in any other scenario, 9 out of 10 faces were illuminated by the cool lights of phone screens. In an otherwise dimly lit bar, the technology cast on their faces made them appear robotic. Unmoving facial structures, monotone voices grunting yeah and without ever really hearing what was said to them. An entire generation on autopilot. Max smiled sadly, reminding himself that in just an hour's time he had the opportunity to pull them from their illusion of connection, how he'd wear his heart on his sleeve right between his thick leather bracelet and his silver one, exposing his soul to them, feeling them come to life in the remembrance of a similar feeling. He liked being the one to remind them that whatever sadness they connected to in his solemn songs was temporary, and he loved seeing their expressions light up when the following 180 seconds of his soul reminded them that there was hope beyond the struggle. He couldn't imagine the woman he'd just met standing in this crowd. He couldn't imagine her dancing freely to his music or even smiling widely enough to sing along. There was something so strange about her, off-putting, but for no real reason at all. She was attractive, clean, and quite friendly. Maybe it was something inside the fiery touches that created the discomfort. Maybe not. Maybe it was Max's shy nature that felt immediately intimidated by someone bold. He couldn't be certain. His eyes lowered quickly, confusion creasing his forehead. He looked over his shoulder toward the bar. It didn't feel like she knew who he was, but the feeling of someone's focus on him while his feet were level with theirs was unusual. Casual interactions were rarely casual when so much of who one is internally is at everyone's fingertips. And respect wasn't earned through merit. No, not these days. These days, respect was given to anyone with a handsome face or melodic voice. If someone had both the way Max did, gaining such a position of importance was even easier still. But there was a darker side to such recognition. Were his defined jawline and radiant blue eyes what originally drew people's interest to his music, or were they the sole reason for the interest? Did it matter what he said, what he sang? Would it matter less if he looked differently? When he reached the door to his green room, Max leaned his shoulder against it, causing a few pieces of its chipping paint to separate from the rusted metal. He inhaled once through his nose rather deeply, then trying to let go of the troublesome thoughts bombarding him about himself, his followers, and his new nameless friend, he released it. Licking his lower lip into his teeth and shaking his head at himself, Max used his shoulder to push the door open and went back into the room with Craig. Placing the glasses on the table next to Craig, he said, "One's for Phil." Yeah, Craig said, throwing one back. Max turned away from him, the mixed drink still in his other hand. His steps were lazy, eyes focusing on the fizzing drink in the glass. He pulled it close to him, hunching his shoulders around it as he leaned over to sniff. His eyes moved to their corners, chin turning in Craig's direction slightly. After turning back, he brought the glass to his lips, wondering if it was the curiosity of the drink's taste or of the person who ordered it that felt so tempting. Still, he hadn't had an opportunity like this before, one that practically forced the liquor into his hand, and with no Philip around to guilt-trip him. Maybe it worked as some sort of fate. Maybe he needed a drink, just a little. Hadn't alcohol helped so many of the great musicians before him? Maybe it hadn't helped them, okay, but they all certainly partook, so it obviously didn't hurt. As he tilted the glass, he felt the fizzing of soda tickle his lips. He smelled the alcohol, but it wasn't very strong, not overwhelming. He opened his lips and let the liquid spill over them. Craig sat with his elbow on his knee, looking up to Max sideways. "What's with you?" he asked sharply, his lips curling. "Nothing," Max said, turning and sitting on the decrepit couch, feeling so out of place with the glass in his hand. Max was careful to keep his hand over its liquid, as if its color confirmed or countered anything, and his eyes fluttered about around Craig, and the inside of his lips stuck in his teeth. Though he tried his best to be innocuous, the battered couch whined against the sound of his jeans. A large hunk of foam spilled out of one of the cushions. "Got some Sprite?" Craig's brows raised. "Yeah," his brows creased as he looked to it. "Or maybe 7-Up, I'm not sure." "You didn't order it?" He stammered. "No, a woman did." "A woman did?" Craig slid against the arm of the opposite couch. "She coming up to the party after?" "No." "Why not?" "I didn't invite her." "Again, why not?" "Because I'm not going to be there." "Man, we've been to 3 stops, and you've already got a notebook filled with lyrics and poems and whatever else you sit around writing. You need to lighten up." "Well, if it makes you feel any better, this isn't just Sprite in this glass." "Yeah, thanks, Sherlock," he said. "Let me see." "What? Why?" "To make sure you're not getting roofied, little girl," he teased, taking the glass. Max shook his head, his lips pursed. After taking a sip, Craig's lips curled. "Awfully sweet," he said, handing it back to Max. "I don't think it's too bad," Max said, lifting the glass hesitantly. He took care to drink from the side Craig hadn't, and his eyes glanced around a bit before he tilted it enough to taste the drink again. He could handle this. "Okay," Philip said as he entered. "Drums are set and I checked your guitar and mic." "Thanks," Max said. "There's a shot for you." Philip's eyes glanced over to the table near Craig, his hands moving to his hips. "Mm-hmm." His head tilted, brows creasing as he looked to the glass in Max's hand. "It's not water, I take it?" He shook his head slowly. "It's vodka," Craig said, standing to leave the room and check his own instrument. Philip's brows raised as he looked at Craig, then back to Max. "How many do you have?" "Just this one," Max said. "Okay." Philip eyed him for a moment longer, watching him lean his head forward and brush his hand into the thick blonde locks of his swept-back hair. "Any particular reason you decided to imbibe tonight?" "It was offered," Max said lowly, the fingernail of his thumb picking at the small chip in the glass. "It's been offered plenty of times in the last 9 or 10 years. Didn't answer my question." "I don't know. This girl." His lips closed and a breath left his nostrils. "Oh, so it's a girl. Okay. I thought we learned our lesson. The type of girl you meet at shows isn't usually your type of girl. Or, I guess we should say, you're not usually their type of guy. One super slow, super sad song per set is more than enough. I really don't need..." "No, it's not like that," he exhaled, looking down to the drink. "I mean, she was nice, really pretty. Something was off about her." "Off like what?" He shook his head. If his reasons for feeling uncomfortable were warm hands and golden eyes, Philip would think he was crazy, or worse, very drunk. He didn't need his friend to worry, not right before a show, and there was no reason to anyway. Even though Philip seemed to forget that they were the same age, Max was a grown man. If he wanted a drink, it wasn't anyone's decision but his own. If he felt uncomfortable, he knew how to steer clear. Everything was fine. Max wasn't going to let this strange need to protect him that Philip had since they were 8 take his mind away from his drums. I'm good, he smiled to Philip. All right, Philip tossed a bottle of water to him. Have a drink before we go on. I have a drink, he said. You have vodka, Philip's brow tweaked. Really don't need you slurring your words or staggering up there. And that concludes the first 15 pages of The Word of the Rock God. The ebook is currently on sale right now and will be for the entire rest of the year, which is super cool. And so that was our night before Christmas read along with me here on my professional YouTube. Most of my set has survived, so I feel pretty cool about it, and my cats didn't kill each other. I don't think. It didn't sound like it. While I was in here, locked away by myself, taking 5 minutes away from their constant bickering. But I might read a little more tomorrow just because I really enjoy, like, reading my own story. This one in particular, I have a weird love for my own fictional characters, and Max is just one I haven't really sat down with in a long time because I wrote his story however long ago, and I might continue just every day reading a little bit more since it is on sale for the entire year. I don't know, you can let me know, or you can let me know if you want me to read from my other book too, because I love Sabrina and never really done anything with Fiberglass Galaxy, like any weird promotional things or whatever, so I'm down, let me know. I'll put the link in the description for this if you want it. If you want a signed copy, I do those too. Just message me on like Twitter or something, and I hope everybody's having a very Merry Christmas so far. Happy holidays if you don't celebrate Christmas. I hope you're just having a wonderful day if you don't celebrate any holidays. So have a good night.